They laughed. My grandson, the pride of our family, pointed to my old navy blue suit and said, "Look, Grandpa's wearing history." The table burst into laughter. I smiled back, sipping my water, pretending it didn't sting. But it did. God, it did. They didn't know the truth. I paid for the flowers, the venue, the live band, the tuxedo he wore. I paid for all of it. I built an empire once, spent 40 years climbing, negotiating, sacrificing. I missed birthdays, canceled vacations. I buried my marriage under meetings and mergers. But I always said it was for them, for the family. Now I sit at table 14, next to the catering exit, alone. They think I'm irrelevant. They see an old man in a dusty suit. What they don't see is the bank transfers, the paperwork, the sacrifice. What they don't know is that the smile I wear tonight hides regret thicker than any secret. And then the microphone squeaked. The groom stepped up. He thanked his parents, his friends, even the bartender. My name wasn't mentioned. I reached for my glass, but my hand shook. Regret, it turns out, tastes a lot like silence. But just as I stood to leave, he paused. "There's one person," he said, voice trembling, "who made this wedding possible. Someone who never asked for credit, who gave more than any of you know." My grandson's face froze. He turned toward me. "Grandpa Joe," he said, "this night is because of you." A glass shattered. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when my name meant something, when a handshake from Joe Rutledge could close a deal faster than a signed contract. I built Rutledge Realty from the dirt up, starting with a rusted pickup, 2 used suits, and a relentless hunger to never be poor again. I was 21 when I sold my first house, and 32 when I bought my first block. By 40, people called me the Kingmaker of Houston. I wore the crown proudly. And every brick I laid, I told myself, was for them, my wife, Linda, and our 2 sons, Evan and Russell. I swore they would never know the shame I knew, growing up with roaches in the pantry and debt collectors banging on the front door. I gave them everything I never had: private school, summer camps, first cars, college tuition, Christmases in Aspen, birthdays at Disney. And when Alex, my first grandson, was born, I bought him a gold bracelet before he could even crawl. It felt good, providing. It felt powerful. But looking back now, I can see it wasn't love I gave. It was leverage. Every gift came with an invisible thread. I wanted loyalty in return. Gratitude, control, maybe. I told myself it was all for the family, but maybe, just maybe, it was for the empire I wanted them to worship me for building. Alex worshipped me when he was little. He'd sit on my lap and call me Grandpa Boss. He loved the stories, how I flipped foreclosures and turned dirt lots into skyscrapers. He told everyone at school his grandpa was rich. That used to make me proud. It also made me blind. Linda left me when I turned 50. She didn't pack bags or slam doors, no drama. She just moved to the guest room one night and never came back. We still hosted dinners together, attended events, smiled for photos. But the marriage was gone. I never told anyone. I couldn't. To the world, we were still Mr. and Mrs. Rutledge, builders of legacies. I buried myself in work. If something was broken, I could fix it with money. That was my answer to everything. I wired funds to Evan when his startup collapsed, and to Russell when his wife left him with a mountain of medical debt. I didn't ask questions. I just paid. That's what a provider does, right? They stopped calling me Dad somewhere along the way. They just called when they needed something. I didn't notice at first. I told myself they were busy, that it was normal. Life gets in the way. But silence stretched longer each time. Evan missed Thanksgiving 3 years in a row. Russell stopped inviting me to his kids' birthdays. I told myself it was fine. I was the patriarch, the backbone. I didn't need affection, just respect. Then I found Linda's journal. It was in a box labeled donations in the garage, probably meant to go out with the next Goodwill run. I never meant to read it, but the handwriting caught my eye. Neat cursive, the kind she used to write me love notes with back in college. Page after page, she chronicled her loneliness, the growing distance, the nights I missed dinner for meetings, the days I was home but not present. She didn't blame me, not exactly. But the words stung sharper than any insult ever could. One entry read, "Joe gives us everything except himself. He buys furniture, not conversation, vacations, not memories. He purchases comfort, but not connection. He buys everything except our hearts." I put the journal back in the box, closed the lid, and sat in my $1 million kitchen, surrounded by marble countertops and stainless steel appliances, feeling like the poorest man alive. How had I gotten it all so wrong? I used to think love was built like a business, that if I invested enough, the return would be loyalty, closeness, family. But what I built wasn't a home. It was a fortress, impressive from the outside, cold and empty inside. Alex stopped calling after college. The last time he visited was 2 Christmases ago. He brought a bottle of wine and stayed 20 minutes, said he had another party to get to. I understood. I didn't blame him, but I missed him. So when I heard he was getting married, I offered to pay. Not just for the rehearsal dinner or a portion of the catering, everything. The venue, the flowers, the entertainment. I wrote the checks quietly, told the planners to give them their dream day. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would bring me back into the fold. Maybe love could still be bought. The ballroom sparkled like a dream. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls. The marble floor gleamed under golden lights, and fresh white roses perfumed the air. Everything was flawless, just like I paid for. Guests were ushered in by men in tuxedos holding trays of champagne. A violin quartet played near the stage. Waiters moved like shadows, silent and efficient. The napkins were folded into swans. Even the ice cubes had the couple's initials inside them. Every detail, my money. I stood near the entrance for a moment, watching the world I had bought come alive. I thought someone might come over. Maybe Evan, maybe Alex. But they were busy. Pictures, hugs, group chats, laughter. I slipped quietly into the front row, my assigned seat, like I was just another rented part of the decor. I had only asked for 2 things, a seat near the front and a chance to give a short toast. Nothing fancy, just a few words, a moment. They agreed politely. Evan said, "Of course, Dad." Alex smiled and said, "Sure, Grandpa. Sounds great." But something in their voices told me they weren't listening. The ceremony began. Vows were exchanged. Tears were wiped. Rings slipped onto trembling fingers. Everyone clapped. Everyone stood. Everyone cried, except me. It was beautiful, no doubt, but I felt like a tourist in a city I helped build, but was never allowed to live in. During dinner, I sat at a round table with Evan's in-laws and 2 colleagues I didn't recognize. One of them leaned over and whispered, "You the bride's uncle." I smiled. "No, I'm the groom's grandfather." He raised an eyebrow, then turned back to his phone. Alex passed by with his groomsmen, laughing about something. When he saw me, he paused, then pointed to the half-full glass of wine in my hand. "Careful with that, Grandpa," he said, chuckling. "Don't want you slurring during your speech." The table laughed. I chuckled too, but it didn't reach my chest. My voice cracked a little. Don't worry, I'll keep it short. Good, he said. We've got a tight schedule. He didn't mean to be cruel. Or maybe he did. I honestly don't know anymore. Dinner passed in a blur of steak and clinking cutlery. Toasts came and went. The bride's father gave a long-winded speech about love and responsibility. Her mother thanked everyone for coming. A bridesmaid cried through her poem. Then the MC stepped up to the mic, smiling wide. Before we move to dancing, let's take a moment to thank some very special people. I straightened a little in my chair. First, let's hear it for the amazing parents of the bride and groom. Thunderous applause. I clapped too. To the friends who helped plan, the vendors, and all the guests who made this night unforgettable. More applause. I waited. Just a name, just a word, just Joe. It never came. I glanced at Evan sitting across the room and caught him avoiding my eyes. Alex was whispering something to the DJ. The MC wrapped up. Now, let's roll the wedding video. The lights dimmed. A giant screen lit up. A slow montage played. Alex and his bride growing up. Baby photos, childhood vacations, prom nights, college moments. Family Christmases, group hugs, laughing around tables. I saw Linda. I saw Russell. I saw Evan. But not me. Not once. In every group photo, I was either cropped out or simply not there. And I realized they hadn't cut me out. I had never been in. I wasn't in the pictures because I wasn't present. Not emotionally, not truly. I had been at the office, on the phone, on planes. I had sent gifts instead of showing up. Paid for parties but never danced. Funded their dreams but never listened to them. Still, it hurt like hell. As the guests applauded the video, I stood up quietly, slipped my suit jacket over my shoulder, made my way toward the exit. No one noticed. Outside, the night air bit my cheeks. I sat on a bench near the valet, listening to the muffled music thump behind the ballroom walls. Maybe I deserved this. Maybe love wasn't something you could finance. And maybe legacy wasn't measured in buildings or wedding venues, but in presence, in time, in moments, in being seen, not just counted. Behind me, inside that perfect ballroom, they were laughing, dancing, celebrating a day I had built with my money, but not with my heart. And they didn't even know I was gone. The valet line stretched down the driveway like a ribbon of headlights. I stood off to the side, waiting for a cab that never seemed to come, when a young man in a tuxedo approached me, jingling keys. "Is this the black Escalade?" he asked, holding them out toward me. I blinked, confused. "I'm not—" "Oh." He cut me off, chuckling awkwardly. "Sorry, thought you were one of the drivers." Before I could respond, Alex walked out with two friends, laughing about some inside joke. The valet turned to him. "Hey, your grandpa's here. Almost drove off in the Escalade." Alex smirked. "Don't give him the keys. He hasn't driven since Bush was in office." Laughter, all around. He didn't correct the valet, didn't say I was a guest, didn't even say my name. Just a joke. A harmless, stupid joke. They walked past me into the ballroom again. I stood there, keys still dangling in front of me, heart heavier than anything I'd carried in years. Later, I wandered into a hallway near the restrooms. I needed a break, a pause, anything to slow the sting in my chest. That's when I heard them. Alex and one of his groomsmen, voices echoing down the corridor. "Man, how much did your grandpa drop on this thing?" the friend asked. "Hell if I know," Alex replied. "He just wires money when I ask. He doesn't care." "Dude, that's wild. Must be nice to have an ATM for a grandparent." Alex laughed. Seriously, he's not family. He's a wallet with legs. They turned a corner and disappeared into the ballroom. I stood frozen. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Wallet with legs. I pushed open the restroom door, locked myself in a stall, and sat on the toilet lid like a man who had just lost something he didn't know he'd been clinging to. My chest ached, but not from my age, from something deeper, something raw. I hadn't cried in 40 years. Not when my father died. Not when Linda left. Not even when I signed over the last of my real estate firm and retired. But I cried then, for the man I had tried to be, for the boy Alex had been. For all the birthdays I'd missed, and the hugs I'd replaced with checks, for a legacy reduced to a punchline. I wiped my face and stared into the mirror, trying to remember when I'd last been seen as something other than useful. By the time I returned to the ballroom, dinner was winding down. People leaned back in their chairs, full and buzzing. Champagne glasses clinked. The DJ flipped through his playlist. And then, the microphone squealed to life. Alex stood at the head of the room, one hand resting lightly on the bride's shoulder. He looked nervous, scanning the crowd with the poise of a man rehearsing gratitude. "I just want to say a few words," he began. "Tonight's been amazing, and there are so many people we need to thank." I sat up straighter. "First, to our parents, thank you for your love and support. To our friends, thank you for the memories. And to our vendors, you made this night magical." He smiled at the audience. "But there's one person in particular who deserves a very special thank you." I held my breath. Alex paused for effect. "Someone who has been there behind the scenes, who took on a huge part of this journey." My name hung in the silence, unspoken but implied. "Someone who worked tirelessly to make this day happen," he said, voice full of admiration. "Here it comes," I thought. Finally. He turned to his bride. "Babe, thank you for managing everything, the budget, the emails, the logistics. I love you." Applause erupted. Laughter, whistles, glasses raised. I didn't move. The wine glass in my hand slipped. It hit the floor and shattered, red spilling like blood across the polished tile. Heads turned. A few guests gasped. Someone called out, "Is he okay?" Alex didn't look at me. No one came. I bent down to gather the glass, my hands trembling, my chest hollow. A waiter rushed over, more for the mess than for me. I stood slowly, brushing off my pants, then looked out across the room. Not one person saw me for who I really was. I was the ghost of a man who had tried to buy love, only to discover that love isn't sold. And in that room full of lights, I had never felt more invisible. The party continued behind me, but I didn't look back. My steps echoed down the driveway as I walked into the night, passing the luxury cars, the champagne laughter, the music that didn't belong to me. Back at home, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time without turning on the lights. The air was heavy, still, like the house had been waiting for me to admit what it always knew. I pulled out a sheet of stationery, gold-trimmed, the expensive kind, and began to write. My hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from everything else. "Dear Alex," I began, "you'll never understand how proud I once was of you. How much I wanted to give you the world, because I thought that was love. I wanted to be the man you looked up to. I thought money could build bridges, that success could buy connection. But I see now that I built walls instead. I paid for every wall between us. I see that clearly now, and maybe it's too late. You called me a wallet with legs, You weren't wrong, because I gave you everything, except myself. This letter is my last gift. Not of money, but of truth. Money is the last thing I can offer, because I've taken everything else away. Do what you want with that truth. Just know, I still love you. I signed it, folded it neatly, and slid it into an envelope. I didn't write his name on the front. The envelope sat silently on the edge of my desk, like a goodbye no one would read. But I didn't sleep that night, because there was still one more thing to do. I opened the safe in my study. Inside, the original version of my will sat in a locked file, one I hadn't looked at in years. In it, I had named Alex as the sole beneficiary of everything. My house, investments, accounts, even the old lake property no one remembered I owned. It was written during a time I believed legacy was about inheritance. I took it out, placed it on the desk beside the letter, and reached for my phone. 3 days passed. Alex didn't call, but a knock came at his door. It wasn't me. It was a lawyer. The young man at the front desk of Alex's firm looked puzzled when he was asked to sign for a legal delivery. Alex opened the envelope, scanning the bold heading at the top. Amended Will of Joseph Rutledge. His hands froze on the page. The will now stated that all assets, effective immediately upon Joe's death, would be donated to a national nonprofit supporting abandoned elderly individuals. The same kind of people who lived the last chapters of their lives forgotten by the families they once raised. There was, however, an addendum, a single page, one condition. If the named individual, Alex Rutledge, wishes to regain beneficiary status, he must agree to live with the testator for a continuous period of 6 months in the original Rutledge family home, with no outside financial assistance, no personal staff, and no deviation from standard living expenses. In other words, live with me. No credit cards, no Uber Eats, no noise-canceling headphones or luxury mattress toppers, no disappearing into apps or excuses. Live with me. Eat what I eat. Sit where I sit. Wake to the creak of old wood floors and the sound of birds instead of calendar alerts. No assistance, no buffers, no distance, just us, for 6 months. After that, he could walk away. No questions, no guilt. Alex didn't respond right away. He tossed the envelope onto his kitchen counter and poured himself a drink. He stared out the window, jaw tight. It felt like manipulation, a final power move. And yet, the words in the letter haunted him. He read it 3 times that night. Money is the last thing I can offer, because I've taken everything else away. He tried to shrug it off, told himself he didn't care, that this was just Joe playing another game of emotional blackmail. But it didn't feel like a game. It felt like a door he wasn't sure he wanted to open, but couldn't stop staring at. 3 nights later, he packed a duffel bag. He packed. No suits, no watches. Just jeans, t-shirts, and a half-used notebook. He stood in front of the old house he hadn't visited in over a decade. The porch light flickered like it always had. The paint peeled at the corners of the door. Everything was smaller than he remembered. He knocked. No one answered. But the door was unlocked. The first week was quiet. Awkwardly, painfully quiet. Alex moved into the spare room, the one with faded blue wallpaper and a twin bed that creaked like it was mourning its own weight. He didn't unpack much. Just enough to survive. Joe tried to offer coffee on the first morning, but Alex mumbled something about having his own and walked out. They shared the kitchen, but not conversation. Shared space, but not warmth. At dinner, Joe cooked. Simple meals, mac and cheese, grilled cheese sandwiches, scrambled eggs for dinner. Alex barely touched his plate. He spent most of his time in his room, headphones in, scrolling endlessly. Occasionally, Joe would knock and offer something, tea, leftover pie, but was met with silence or short responses. It wasn't hatred. It was worse. It was indifference. Joe didn't push. He just moved through the days slowly, careful not to overstep, careful not to hope. One rainy afternoon, with nothing better to do, Alex found himself poking around the old hallway closet for an extra towel. He opened a drawer near the bottom and paused. Letters. Dozens of them. All in the same neat handwriting. His mother's name was on every envelope, some opened, most not. He sat on the floor and began reading. Linda, I know I hurt you. I know I wasn't present in the ways that mattered. Linda, please tell the boys I miss them. I saw Alex on TV yesterday. Tell him Grandpa's proud. Each one was written like a man trying to learn how to speak a language he was never taught. Alex read for over an hour. The rain tapped on the windows, and time seemed to pause. He realized then, Joe had always cared. He just hadn't known how to show it. His whole life, Alex had been taught to measure love in time spent, in hugs, in laughter. Joe's love was measured in the things he built, the bills he paid, the letters he wrote but never sent. Alex sat there for a long time. The letters fanned out around him like pieces of a broken bridge finally being rebuilt. That night, he joined Joe at the dinner table without being asked. I read your letters, he said softly. Joe looked up, surprised. He didn't speak, just waited. They weren't perfect, Alex continued, but they were real. Joe nodded. I didn't know how to fix things. Still don't. Alex picked up his fork and took a bite of spaghetti. Maybe it's not about fixing. Maybe it's just staying. For the first time in years, they ate together in peace. The next morning, Joe didn't come downstairs. Alex knocked once, then again. No answer. He opened the door and found Joe slumped on the bed, breathing but pale, his face slack on one side. Panic surged through him. He called 911, rode in the ambulance, sat beside the hospital bed as monitors beeped and nurses moved in and out. The doctor said it was a minor stroke, not life-threatening, but serious enough to require rest, therapy, care. Joe was asleep when Alex first sat down. He watched the rise and fall of the man's chest, noticed the trembling in his fingers. When Joe woke, his eyes flickered toward him, surprised. You're here, he rasped. Alex nodded. Yeah, I'm here. Joe tried to sit up, winced, then smiled weakly. If you really hated me, he whispered, you wouldn't be. Alex didn't answer. Instead, he stood and reached for Joe's hand. It was calloused, frail, but familiar. They didn't speak for a while. Words felt too heavy, too small. And then, something broke open. Joe's eyes welled up, and for the second time in the span of weeks, tears slid down his cheeks. Not from pain, not from regret, but from the quiet, overwhelming relief of being seen. Alex leaned in and hugged him, awkwardly at first, then fully. Joe's arms wrapped around his grandson, shaky and thin but steady. It was the first time they'd ever truly held each other. And in that moment, neither of them said, I'm sorry, because they didn't need to. It was already understood. The reception was held in a rustic barn, lit with hundreds of soft white bulbs strung across the wooden beams. It smelled faintly of lavender and sawdust, the kind of scent that made you feel both alive and nostalgic. Alex stood by the bar, laughing with the groom, his college roommate, when the DJ called for silence. Before we bring out the cake, the DJ announced, we have a special speaker. Someone who's traveled a long road to be here. Alex looked up, already knowing what was coming. Joe, wearing a charcoal gray suit and his old leather shoes, stepped slowly toward the microphone. His gait was slower now. The stroke had taken a piece of his balance, but not his presence, not his voice. "Evening," Joe said, voice gravelly but warm. A few guests clapped. Most just waited, curious. Joe reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, creased at the corners, worn soft with time. "I wrote this over a year ago," he said, unfolding it. "For a different wedding. I didn't get to read it then. But tonight, I think it finally belongs." The room quieted. "I once believed love was something you earned, that if you worked hard enough, gave enough, bought enough, you'd deserve it, that it would come back to you." He paused, glanced at Alex, who stood still now, eyes locked on his grandfather. "But love isn't a transaction," Joe continued. "It's a presence. It's staying when it's hard, listening when it's uncomfortable, showing up, not just in money, but in time, in truth, in humility." A sniffle echoed from somewhere near the front. "I didn't always get that right," Joe said. "I thought providing was the same as parenting, that success meant I was doing my part. But what I really built was distance." He folded the paper slowly, looked around the room. "If you love someone, don't just tell them. Sit with them, walk with them, forgive, and ask for forgiveness, even when you're not sure you deserve it." For a moment, no one moved, not even the servers. Then came the clapping. Not polite, not obligatory, real. Some stood, a few wiped tears. Even those who had once laughed at the old man in the outdated suit found their eyes wet and their throats tight. Afterward, Alex hugged him hard and long. "I didn't know you still had that speech," he whispered. Joe smiled. "Some things are worth saving." A few months later, Joe was gone, peacefully, in his sleep. No pain, no drama, just the quiet exit of a man who had finally been heard. Alex handled the arrangements. The house, the papers, the service. He did it all himself. No assistants, no shortcuts. Just the way Joe would have wanted. When the will was opened, no one was surprised. Joe had already given everything. There was no estate, no accounts. Just one letter, handwritten, in the same stationery he always used. "I have no riches left to give," it read. "Only this. I was wrong, and I tried to make it right. If my story helps someone else love better, then I leave behind more than any fortune ever could." Beneath the signature was a single line. "We are remembered not for what we leave behind, but for who we leave behind better." Alex folded the letter and placed it in a frame beside his desk. Months later, he established the Rutledge Foundation, a scholarship for young adults raised without fathers. Not just financial aid, but mentorship, connection, guidance. Something real, something lasting. At the launch ceremony, he told Joe's story. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. He spoke of mistakes and redemption, of a man who bought silence and later earned forgiveness. After everyone left, Alex returned home and began sorting through what little remained of the house. In the back of an old dresser drawer, buried under receipts and worn ties, he found a photograph. It was faded, edges curling. In it, a younger Joe held a small boy, toddler-aged, against his chest, on a kindergarten playground. The boy's face was mid-laugh, hands grasping at Joe's collar. On the back, in Linda's handwriting, it read, "First day of school. He wouldn't let go of Grandpa." Alex stared at the photo for a long time, breath caught in his throat. His mother had never shown him this. But Joe had kept it, not framed, not displayed, just quietly saved, like love often is,